This is Brandon Steele here. Welcome to the Mainsail Financial Group Podcast series, where we host industry experts and local professionals to share some areas of expertise that we don't really focus on day to day. Today we have Chelsea August joining us to discuss human behavior, share a little bit about some areas that maybe we can all work on to improve our day-to-day lives and productivity in our careers as well. Chelsea's actually a counselor right here in Kirkland. She's got a bachelor's in counseling and a master's in counseling psychology. She's got an extremely broad background and actually has helped organizations do trainings to help motivate, educate, and work with professionals here in the area. She's got her own practice right now, managing a private practice as a business owner. So I don't think we could ask for anybody better to have kind of join us and share a little bit more about some of these insights and give us some things to take home. So
Sounds great.
Thanks, Chelsea, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I guess the first thing that I might want to talk a little bit about is competition. So right now we've got, we've got the unemployment rate is as low as it's ever been. Jobs are getting more and more competitive, and even so to find growth within those jobs, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess I was just kind of curious if you can maybe share some thoughts on how you're seeing people kind of get a competitive advantage and what they're doing to get a little leg up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, tough question. You're right, it is tough right now. I think one of the biggest things that I see people being successful with is that they're very intentional in the way they present themselves. And this can mean a lot of different things. It's not just your physical appearance, the way you come across. There's a lot to that. And I mean, I believe that basically intentionality just means that you know what you value and you're able to kind of get that across to other people. And I think that takes spending time on that ahead of time, before interviewing, before meeting employers. That's something that takes a certain amount of time and self-awareness.
Sure.
So I think it's important to convey to employers that you can be useful to their company, and yet I believe you want to have a strong foundation of like who you are, that you don't compromise. So I think this comes across as confidence in a sense, but it can be backed up with some tangible things. Physical appearance is actually pretty important. The way you present yourself, the way that you dress. I think dressing for your body type so that you feel comfortable, so that you feel confident when you walk in the door. There's a lot to that.
Sure.
And I think employers see that as a very respectable thing when you walk in looking prepared. Mm-hmm. So physical appearance is important, and it also just gives you a sense of confidence walking in the door.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that too. I would imagine as you tie that into the first part, that's going to help out the confidence. And
it does, and it's such an easy way to do that.
Sure.
Anybody can kind of work on that piece.
Mm-hmm.
And then otherwise, I think it's very important to harness your ability to manage your time. Mm-hmm. So that means showing up at the right time, at the time you've said that you would be there, if not earlier. Being sure that you're prepared ahead of time, you've thought it through, you've thought about questions they might ask. I think this can be very apparent to an employer, whether you've prepared or not. And I think that some people really struggle with time management. They may not even want to admit it. This is actually something that I feel like I've struggled with in the past and have really worked to get better at. Mm-hmm. And therapists, that's not necessarily our forte. It's like doing things of that sort. And so it's something I've really built for myself is kind of looking at from the other person's perspective. What does it mean when I show up on time? It shows that I value them, that I value their time, that I've showed up prepared, all of the above.
Yeah.
So hugely important.
Sure.
And then also, if you have an online presence at all, I think it's really important to be consistent across those things. So like, let's say you have a website and you have a LinkedIn and you have a Facebook profile for your business. I think it's important to have like consistency across. So the wording you use, the phrasing, the font even, like the pictures you use, right? If you have a professional photo of yourself on one page, use it on another page so people can easily recognize who you are, and they know, okay, this is the same person. It's really important, and it's actually pretty simple to do.
Yeah.
Although I think that people get that wrong often. Therapists get it wrong often. We need help in that area.
I think I've seen some examples of that.
Yeah, I have too. And so I do think that is really important, and even just things like how you word yourself, not going on and on and on and on. People won't read it, right? So being concise, All of those things are helpful
Sure.
in presenting yourself. So
Yeah, that's good. I think, to come back to that time management side of things.
yeah.
So we're actually working on bringing on some new people as well. We're kind of growing our business here. And that is like an instant deal killer. So I would agree with you
Right.
100%.
Yes.
And it's amazing, and I think it's because of the market lately.
Mm-hmm.
How many people do show up late or don't show or aren't dressed properly or
It's surprising.
It is.
Because those are really things that we all can manage.
Mhm.
It doesn't take really any extra higher intelligence, right, to be able to manage your wardrobe or manage what time you get there. It's stuff that we can practice.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. When you say practice, are there any things that you can think of that may be able to help somebody that is not, fine-tuned in that area?
As far as time management,
Mhm.
I think that it's better to practice on the small things. The things that, maybe won't be such big problems, like showing up late to an interview may not get you the job. That's kind of a big deal if you really wanted the job. So starting with smaller things like, valuing your friend's time. If you're showing up for some type of friend social event, be there on time.
Mm-hmm.
Practice it. I think the more that you get used to doing it and it becomes a habit, the more able you are to manage that. It's things like, when we're going to show up at a social event, we realize, oh, there's time that it takes to get there in the car.
Mm-hmm.
We may have to walk up a few stairs to get there. We may not be able to find parking. It's including all the transit time
Yeah.
to get places. And when you start breaking it down, you start to see where you are failing.
Sure.
But starting on the smaller things where it's not such a big problem,
Mm-hmm.
and then building to, the more professional areas.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so a lot of those aspects that you touched on were on people looking for new positions.
Mm-hmm.
What about, to kind of switch gears here a little bit,
Yeah.
somebody that maybe is already in a job and they're looking to grow their career, move on to the next step, maybe move into a different career path?
Sure.
What are some things that you see there?
As far as time management still?
I guess more so how to separate yourself a little bit.
Okay. So as far as how to differentiate yourself, I guess is what I hear.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that involves a lot of different things. One of the biggest areas I think people can really stand out is in their people skills.
Mhm.
And I know that sounds really, cliche, but if you want to be successful in business, you have to be good with people. You just do. And there are lots of ways to work on that. I think that one of the biggest areas that I see people succeeding in almost any area of business is by improving their emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever heard of that term, but it sounds kind of strange, but it's really the ability to kind of recognize other people's emotions, to be able to act on your own emotions, to recognize how you're feeling, to be able to process how you're feeling. I think that it's the best way to learn how to communicate.
Mhm.
And when you communicate well, you're able to assert yourself in different types of positions. It's a skill that I think people can use across many different platforms.
Sure.
And so I think, the ways that I work with clients on emotional intelligence is by learning emotion words, so we can kind of go from, oh, I'm feeling sad today, to more intricate emotion words like, I'm lonely,
Mhm.
or I am feeling, depressed, or I am feeling whatever. There's lots of different types of the feeling of sad, right? And I think sometimes people aren't quite capable of recognizing those things in themselves.
Mhm.
When they start learning some of that language, they're able to communicate really well with others and start to recognize what they need, what they're looking for. And, I think people are afraid of going there sometimes. I think people see those as very separate, business and emotion, right?
Mhm.
But I think they're actually very close. And I think it's very apparent when you notice somebody who is just not in tune with themselves.
Sure.
And this takes a lot of self-awareness, right? Which is, again, something that we work on a lot in
Mhm.
counseling.
Well, I think that it's like full circle here. That kind of ties back into the confidence side of things too.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, no, I was just going to say,
Yeah,
as far as the confidence goes, if you know yourself well,
Mhm.
that comes across.
Sure.
Yeah. And if you can express yourself well,
Mhm.
that's a very good quality to have.
Yeah, interesting. So basically, it's just expanding that vocabulary, getting a better sense of actually, I guess, letting out what you're feeling, and that can help kind of lead to all those different aspects down the road
Sure.
too.
Yeah, and being able to regulate what you're feeling, right? I mean, I think that we sort of, again, we see our personal and our business lives as very separate, and yet our full self goes into each one.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we manage that? How do we manage our own feelings, our own, the way we approach our work and how we interact with our coworkers and all of the above?
Sure.
So.
Yeah, and that comes back to people skills,
Mm-hmm.
which, I think that's a big thing right now, and it seems like it's kind of losing its its way as we get more into the technology side of things.
Mm-hmm.
What about people who are maybe introverts or, maybe just don't like networking or getting out and meeting new people?
Yes.
What can they do to help get a leg out there?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's really important to bring up because it's not something that everybody feels that they're really good at or drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the truth is, networking is huge, right? It's important to know some of the right people in the business areas that you want to go into. And sometimes that only takes a couple people, right? I think that typically, as far as introverts go, the people that I've worked with, it's not that they aren't able to be close and communicate well with others.
Mm-hmm.
It's that it's hard to do it in a big group.
Sure.
So maybe considering, okay, how could I do this in a way that suits my personality?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like big groups, you don't have to network that way.
Yeah.
Maybe you call somebody up and say, would you want to meet for coffee?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to talk about this or that, right? It doesn't have to be something that feels anxiety producing.
Yeah, interesting. So maybe kind of like that quality over quantity conversation.
Absolutely, yes. And I think that's actually more important anyway. I think that when an employer is looking for an employee, they want somebody who's authentic.
Yeah.
They're not looking for a fake connection.
Sure.
So.
Sure. So, with some of the folks that you work with, when you see, especially, I guess maybe leading towards some of the more successful folks,
Mm-hmm.
when they have these big goals, I'm kind of switching gears here a little bit, but when they have these big goals,
Mm-hmm.
how do you recommend that they break those down into daily activities or ways to kind of digest that,
Mm-hmm.
go towards it?
We actually do this a lot in counseling because I see a lot of people who come in with huge goals, right? Like, I want to be in a really fulfilling long-term relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, geez, that's a big goal,
Sure.
right? Or I want to lose 35 pounds, or I want to get this like amazing position at my work. I want to get this promotion, whatever it is. And I think that one way I like to look at it is kind of, let's outline that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take that, and that's a lot of what I did in grad school even, is okay, take this big concept and kind of outline it down. So how can we do that and then work backwards?
Mm-hmm.
So like if we're using the example of, let's say, like losing 20 pounds, right? That's a big goal. That's a huge goal.
Sure.
And I think sometimes people attack the goal by, without having broken it down.
Mm-hmm.
And they fail
Yeah.
because it's too big. So instead you kind of start breaking it down into different things. So what does that involve? It involves exercise maybe, nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
portion control, all of these things, right? And then even those can be broken down.
Sure.
So if you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to get there by exercising, well, that means I'm actually going to take 10 minutes a day and walk my dog. Okay, well, that's more doable.
Yeah.
It went from, I'm going to lose 20 pounds to, I just need to walk my dog once a day.
Mm-hmm.
That's an improvement.
Yep.
And I think it takes celebrating those small wins as well.
Sure.
Because when you see it as like moving towards that goal, it still feels like it's an accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
So celebrating the small wins on the way to the bigger goal.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're kind of like not biting off more than you can chew.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So kind of just basically, so instead of having a goal of losing 20 pounds or whatever it might be, you say, okay, let's break that down into smaller targets.
Absolutely.
And celebrate them as you hit them rather than going where, I'm never getting there.
Totally. And with like trying to get a promotion or something, it's how do you break that down? If your goal is to be a lot more organized, if your goal is to be a lot more able to communicate, you can work on those with little things at a time every day until you get to that place.
Sure.
And I think each goal can be broken down like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tying back into some of the more successful folks that you work with, is there any sort of single trait or single attribute that you see with a lot of those folks that you think really leads to their success?
So I think one of the biggest things is really self-awareness.
Okay.
I think that is one of the things that makes people the most successful.
Mm-hmm.
And that also, I think, is a big, lofty goal.
Sure.
Like when you hear that, it's kind of vague. It's like, how do I even get there, right? But I think some of the people that do the best in business, in life, in relationships in general are the people who are self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
They're the people who recognize their own strengths, who recognize maybe areas they need to grow, who aren't afraid to look at those things, who are aware of the way that their background has affected their current life,
Yeah.
right? We all have met people who have a tough background who you can really tell in their current life that it plays out.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not necessarily even aware. So at least in counseling, we work on that every day. We work on self-awareness and how to notice those things in yourself.
Yeah.
And how to work towards becoming more self-sufficient, self-aware, all of the above.
Okay. And you mentioned within that, part of that's figuring out some of your strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
How do you, if you're kind of lost on that, you
Yeah.
aren't really sure of what your strengths or weaknesses might be, do you have any suggestions on how you can kind of figure that out?
Yes, that is that's a tough one, and it does come with further self-awareness. It's a piece of that. And I think one of the things I ask, actually a few different questions I'll ask clients as far as the strengths is,